Three friends, Jake, Lisa, and Mike, have been planning this trip for months. After an exhausting year of work in a stuffy San Francisco office, they dreamed of a real adventure. They thought of fresh air, the whisper of century-old trees, and complete freedom from civilization. Jake Reynolds, 28, a skeptical IT specialist, was the main voice of reason in their company. He didn't believe in the supernatural or urban legends. To him, Bigfoot was just a tourist fiction. Lisa Morgan, 26, a freelance photographer, loved nature and mystical stories. She was the one who suggested going to the Redwoods. However, not only because of the stunning scenery, but also because of rumors that something huge and covered in wool had been seen in these woods for decades. Mike Turner, 29, had a passion for zoology and all things paranormal. He knew every Bigfoot sighting story by heart, collected newspaper clippings, and even blogged about unexplained phenomena. For him, this trip wasn't just a vacation, it was a hunt for a legend. They left early in the morning, when the fog still lingered on the highway. The road winded between the hills, and as they approached the park, the trees grew taller and more massive. "Look at them," Lisa exclaimed, leaning out of the car window to take a picture of the giant sequoias. Their trunks, covered with thick reddish bark, resembled the columns of some ancient temple. "Some of these trees are said to be over 2,000 years old," Mike said, flipping through his notebook of places where Bigfoot had been seen. Jake just shook his head. "Do you really believe there's an 8-foot-tall, hairy Sasquatch roaming around?" "I don't." "I know," Mike smiled enigmatically. They camped in a remote part of the park, away from the main hiking trails. While Jake assembled the tents and Lisa laid out the food, Mike disappeared into the thicket, promising to return with firewood. A half hour passed, then an hour. Where was he going? Jake grunted, getting ready to go searching, when suddenly the sound of broken branches came from the darkness. Mike ran out into the clearing, his eyes burning with excitement. "You aren't going to believe this. I found the trail." He held out his phone with a photo. A huge foot, shaped like a human foot, but too big, almost 45 centimeters long, was clearly imprinted on the wet ground. Lisa gasped. "That's it! Yes, that's it!" Mike almost shouted. Jake frowned. "Or it's the mark of some bear that someone faked for tourists." However, Mike wasn't listening anymore. He was sure Bigfoot was around somewhere. During the night, the forest came alive. At first it was just rustles. Maybe it was animals, maybe it was the wind. But then, something heavy passed through the bushes a few meters from the tents. Lisa woke up to a muffled grunt coming from just above her tent. Can you hear that?" she whispered in a shaky voice. Jake, annoyed, looked outside with his flashlight. A beam of light caught out of the darkness. 2 glowing dots, eyes reflecting light about 3 meters off the ground. They disappeared as quickly as they had appeared. "It was a deer, or a bear," Jake said, but his voice sounded uncertain. Mike was silent. He knew. It was watching them. The first rays of sunlight were barely breaking through the dense canopy of the ancient sequoias when Jake woke to the strange sensation of unnatural silence in the camp. There was no chirping of birds, no rustling of leaves, just a resounding emptiness, as if the forest itself were holding its breath. He climbed out of the tent, rubbing his eyes, and immediately realized something was wrong. Lisa's tent, which yesterday had been neatly set up between 2 mighty roots, was now a ghastly sight. The tarpaulin was torn from the inside with long, uneven cuts, as if some monstrous claw had torn it. There was a crumpled sleeping bag inside, and 2 deep furrows on it, as if something huge had dragged Lisa away. "Liz? Liz, where are you?" Jake's voice shook, echoing between the trees, but there was no answer. He turned toward Mike's tent, but he was already standing outside, pale, pupils dilated with terror. His gaze was fixed on the ground. "Look," Mike whispered. Around Lisa's tent, on the morning dew-damp ground, footprints were clearly visible. However, they were not human footprints. Giant, almost half a meter long, with distinct 5 fingerprints and deep claw indentations, they led from the ruined tent deep into the forest. And there were other tracks in between. They were smaller, but with the same pattern, as if Lisa had been dragged, clinging desperately to the ground, trying to resist. "We need to get help, now!" Jake reached for the satellite phone, but Mike grabbed his arm sharply. "No, don't you understand? It's him. We can't just walk away." Mike's voice sounded more like healthy obsession than fear. "Have you lost your mind? Lisa's gone. She's been kidnapped. That's why we have to follow the trail. You want to leave her out there, alone, with that?" Jake wanted to object, but his eyes fell on something that made his blood run cold. At the entrance to Lisa's tent, bloodstains were clearly visible on one of the torn tarps. Small ones, as if from scratches, or from being grabbed too hard. "She hurt," Jake whispered. Mike was already packing his backpack, stuffing flashlights, a knife, and a walkie-talkie into it. "Then we don't have time. Let's go." Jake was still hesitating. Every cell in his body was screaming that going into that thicket was crazy. However, the thought of Lisa, alone, scared, possibly bleeding. He took a deep breath and nodded. "Only let's at least mark the path, okay?" What they didn't know yet was that the tracks weren't leading to Lisa. They led to what was waiting for them deep in the thicket. The tracks became clearer and clearer, fresher and fresher. They led deep into the forest, to where the trunks of the sequoias formed an impenetrable wall. Sunlight barely broke through the dense canopy of foliage. The air was thick with the odor of fresh leaves. And something else. An animal odor, sharp, like the smell of wet wool and old blood. Jake was walking behind Mike, his hands shaking, his flashlight showing only a narrow path through the darkness. Suddenly Mike froze. "Can you see it?" Through the ivy and ferns was something unnatural in this ancient forest, a wall of rough-hewn logs, an abandoned cabin. It seemed to have grown into the forest, to be part of it. Ivy braided the walls, the roof sagged under the weight of time, and the door. The door was broken open, not just open, and torn, as if something huge had burst inside with no intention of knocking. Inside the hut, the smell hit the nose. Musty, musty, and underneath it all, the sweet, sickly stench of decay. "God," Jake whispered. The cabin was trashed. The table had been overturned, the shelves thrown to the floor, and the walls were deep scratches furrowing the wood for several centimeters, as if left by claws. And that's when Jake saw the inscription. On the wall, directly opposite the entrance, in blood, already blackened, but still eerily recognizable, was written, "He sees you." The letters spread out, as if the writer had been in a hurry, or had been interrupted. "Lisa," Mike called hoarsely. In the corner, under a pile of torn rags, lay a backpack. Jake picked it up with trembling hands. Inside was an empty flask, a crumpled pack of energy bars, and a camera. The screen was cracked, but the camera still worked. The last photo was taken at night. A blurry, shaky shot, the darkness of the forest, and in it, 2 glowing eyes reflecting the flash, too high above the ground. Roar. The sound came from everywhere at once, muffled, thudding, more like an earthquake than the voice of a living thing. The hut shook, dust falling from the ceiling. "We need to leave. Now!" Jake shouted, but Mike stood frozen, staring at the doorway. The shadow moved, covered in black, piled wool, with shoulders wider than the doorway. It filled the entire space. Eyes. That's what Jake remembered most. Yellow, luminous, with vertical pupils like a cat's. It was breathing hot, stinking air in his face, smelling of rotting meat and bear dens. Its claws were long, curved, digging into the door jamb, leaving fresh furrows in the wood. It wasn't attacking. It studied them, head tilted to the side, as if trying to understand. A second roar. Not from him this time, from the forest. Then another, and another. "There's, several," Jake whispered, and at that moment the Bigfoot in front of them shuddered. It turned its head toward the forest, nostrils dilating, picking up the scent. Then, with a single leap, it was gone. It was gone. Jake and Mike were found 2 days later. They were walking along the side of the road, barefoot, in tattered clothes, with empty eyes. "They're in the trees," muttered Jake. Mike said nothing. He was laughing, quietly, madly, non-stop. Lisa was never found. Sometimes at night, hikers hear a woman's laughter coming from the treetops, and if you dare to look up, the branches of the sequoias move, even though there's no wind, and for a moment you can see shadows, huge, inhuman, and very, very fast.